Today we're going to review what a function is and isn't, and we're going to talk about function notation. So you should have the necessary things off of the table. On Friday we talked about what a function was and was not, and essentially we're looking at repeat x's. So when I'm looking at these tables, it says which one is a function. I'm looking at only this x column, and I'm looking to see, I'm looking for the table that has no repeat x's. Well, all of these repeat, and these repeat. So my answer is H because all of those x's are different. So today when we look at this, we are evaluating functions. So we're going to look at something called function notation. We're going to substitute into a function and simplify. So you might want to have your calculator handy. In your table of contents, we're going to add function notation on page 17. So here are our notes today. A couple of things that I do need you to keep in mind as far as vocabulary when we talk about functions. I'm going to make a little T-chart. You should be able to fit this at the top of yours. We are going to be using things like f of x and x. F of x just means y. X is obviously x. Some other words we're going to be using today and in this unit are domain and range. We're going to be talking about input and output. We're also going to be talking about independent variables and dependent variables. So when we look at our notes here, it's talking about introduction of functions. We talked a little bit about that Friday when you did your notes. That should also be a review of 8th grade. A relation is a set of ordered pairs, x and y, where x is associated with a specific y. Thus the no repeat x's. That's what that means. A function is a relationship when each x is paired with exactly one y. Sorry, my one is a little crooked there. One y. Each input or x, if we zoom in on that to make a little bit of, all right, there's that word we talked about. Input is x, has exactly one output or y. X values cannot repeat. The graph passes that vertical line test, so that's where we talked about the line can only touch one coordinate on the line, and all functions are relations, but not all relations are functions. Okay. If you need to refer back to your notes from Friday that you copied, you can do that as well. So the new part today is what we call function notation. So function notation, you can see here, it says f of x. F of x is exactly the same thing as y. So we're just saying that y is a function of x. So if we see f of x, then it's just y. And we have an equation here. So what we have over here is then f of 7. That's how we say that, f of 7. So what that means is if I was to write f of x above that, I can see, in fact, that my x is in the same spot as the 7. So what this is saying is that x equals 7. Okay, so it's just a fancy way of saying wherever you see x, you're going to plug in the 7. So evaluate, this is just another fancy word that means solve, right? Solve f of 7 for the function f of x. So notice the 7 is where the x is. So if I have negative 2 parentheses x, I'm going to put the 7 there, plus 9 minus 10. So when I substitute this in, kind of like when we solved equations and we put the number in for the letter to check it, and you could then put this in your calculator, or if you wanted to solve it by hand, you could do that. Negative 32 minus 10 is a negative 42. So what we would write is f of 7, because 7 is what we put in for x, equals negative 42. And what that is saying is that x is 7 and y is negative 42. If we graphed that equation on our table, we would have 7, negative 42 on that line. So that takes us to this graph. Okay, so when we're looking at the graph, g of x, f of x, all of those, these numbers inside are all representing x. Okay, so I could say g of x. So all those numbers are in place of x. So what we're going to do is we're saying, okay, I'm going to come over here to this graph and I'm going to find where x is 7, right? So here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. Oh, I'm sorry, negative 7. So here's where x is negative 7. I'm going to draw a line and I'm going to touch my graph and I'm going to go over and I'm going to find my y. So when x is negative 7 on this graph, y is negative 4. When it's a graph, it's actually much, much easier. If I was to look at negative 2, so here's where x is negative 2. I'm going to go down and touch my line. I'm going to go over. My y is negative 1. My x is 1. I'm going to go down and over. It is still 1. And then g of 5, so here's where x is 5. I'm going to go touch my line and up to y is positive 1. I forgot my negative on number 3. So when it's a graph, you're just looking for that number on the x-axis and telling me what the y number is. Just to piggyback off what we looked at, our review notes on Friday, if I was to draw a vertical line, you can see that my vertical line is touching in multiple spots, so this is not a function. Okay. Let's do some more evaluating. And again, you're going to want to have your calculator for this. You have a of x, you have b of x, and then you also have c of x. So you need to look at this first letter, and it's going to tell you which equation to use. So this first one is a of x. So, and it says a of negative 4. So we are putting, right, that's my x. So I'm going to put negative 4 right here. So I wrote a of negative 4, and I'm going to rewrite it with that number, 3 times negative 4 minus 1. And again, you could put that into your calculator just like that. It's going to say a of negative 4 equals negative 13. And the reason for that is, again, when we graph it, that will be a coordinate, just like when we looked at the graph over here. This next one says b of 3. So b of 3 is equal, so now I'm coming to my b equation right here. And I'm going to plug 3 in for my x. So 2 parentheses 3 plus 3 quantity squared. When I put that into my calculator, or we could do it by hand if we wanted, 6 squared is 36, so b of 3 is 72. This next one goes back to a, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit, a of 5. So a of 5 is equal to 3 times 5 minus 1. I'm going back to that a equation right here because it's got an a. Okay. And when we plug that in, we get a of 5. 3 times 5 is 15, minus 1 is 14. And then my last one, okay, this is a c equation, so I'm going to use this equation right here. And it's c of 7, so my 7 is here. Now be careful. This is a negative. I always put my number that I'm plugging in, I always kind of put it in parentheses just to be sure. Negative 7 plus 7. Well, negative 7 plus 7 is just 0. Okay, so those are your notes. So the thing you need to take away is the number in the parentheses goes in place of the x. And the number in parentheses, if it's a graph, that's your x value on the graph, and find your y. So now what you need to do, I have 2 practice papers for you, a front and a back. The back is plugging into the equations. The front with the leaf right here, this is it a function? Right? If it is a function or not, remember, a function has no repeat x's. Okay. You also have some graphs on there. Down here, they want you to create the 3 different representations from your notes on Friday. And then here, you're going to plug it in, and you can color down here if you like. 13 to 20, you're using the graph.